great plan. That this coup was great and America ought to back it 100%. So it was really supported by our South Vietnamese ambassador there. He was privy to the information and really thought that this was a good idea to help the South Vietnamese throw a coup up against Diem. Well, in October of 1963, the Kennedy administration got the word of this coup. And he was trying to make a decision on whether he thought it was a good idea. Henry Cabot Lodge told him he thought it was a great idea. So it gets on Kennedy's desk, so to speak, in October of 1963. Just a month or so before what? Kennedy's assassination. Now Kennedy, who does he talk to about this? Who's he going to talk to about whether this is a good idea? His main advisors. So he had a split support or mixed support from members of his cabinet. Did he ask every single member? Yes. Did he take every single member's opinion? No. He took opinions of people like Robert Kennedy and Bob McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense, and General Maxwell Taylor, we've talked about. That was a Joint Chief of Staff, military general, and he took the advice of Dean Rusk. Those were the four players he really listened to. Again, Bobby Kennedy, his brother, Secretary of Defense McNamara, we've all heard about these people. General Maxwell Taylor, who was his general in charge, ex-con member of the Cuban Missile Crisis, he took his opinion on this. And then he asked Dean Rusk, as Secretary of State, what do you think about this? Should we be an American-backed coup? Should we back this coup, this overthrow of Diem? Robert Kennedy, Robert McNamara, and Taylor were against doing it. Bobby Kennedy, Secretary of State McNamara, and General Maxwell Taylor were against an American-backed coup. They were against it. Who was for it then? Dean Rusk. And why do you think Rusk was for it? Have we been telling, you could tell in Kennedy's interview, have we been kind of telling Diem, you got to change your ways, you got to change your ways, you got to change your ways? And has he ever changed his way? And that was Rusk's part. We've talked to this guy about changing his ways. How many times? And he's not doing it. So let's back this coup. It's just insanity to do the same thing over and over again to no avail. So Bobby Kennedy, McNamara, and Maxwell Taylor don't think it's a very good idea. Dean Rusk did not see the risk in it, and he thought we should do it because we've told him over and over and over, and he's not listening. He's not going to change. So let's get him out of it. Okay? Now, when Kennedy was thinking about this, what has he got to be careful of? What doesn't he want? Another what?
Bay of Pigs.
Bay of Pigs. Very good. He can see Bay of Pigs written all over this. So he doesn't want that. So he takes a little more time in thinking whether this is a good idea or not, because he doesn't want another Bay of Pigs. So he took a little more thought process than he did during that fiasco. So after he studies this and thinks about this and thinks about this and thinks about this, does he support it with 3 of his cabinet members saying no and 1 saying yes, or does he say no? He supports it. He supports it. He gives the plan his approval. So on November 1st of 1963, 21 days before the president is assassinated in Dallas, the military of South Vietnam successfully overthrows Diem. Successfully overthrows him. So on November 1st, 1963, the South Vietnamese military acted with the support of the Americans and disposed of Prime Minister Diem of power. Hunky-dory! But what else did they do?
Killed him.
They assassinated him, which Kennedy did not. They executed him, which Kennedy did not know was going to be part of the deal. He was actually shocked by that. Didn't particularly care for that. Well, you overthrow and exile. Send him out of the country. And that's what Kennedy thought was going to happen. They were going to overthrow him. They were going to exile him out of the country. And when he was executed, and how can America control that? Are we over there in the middle of that thing? It held a shot of your chest there, Pennington, just so you know. Perfect. Anyway, so he wasn't aware of an assassination, but those South Vietnamese military, they liked Diem? No. You think it took much to pull the trigger? No. But Kennedy didn't okay that. That wasn't part of the bargain. And so he was shocked at the assassination Because he said he had made it clear when he made the decision there that if he did throw Diem, or they did overthrow Diem, that he needed to be exiled out of the country. Well, they didn't do that. They just executed him, and Kennedy felt responsible for that. Yes?
Was there any conspiracies about Diem's supporters being, like, planning Kennedy's assassination because he supported them?
That's a very good question. Actually, Diem didn't have too many supporters. You know, he had just his inner circle, and that's a very good question. But they would have no control over that. No, he had very few, everybody hated him. You know what I mean? So he didn't, that's a good question, he didn't have very many. That's a good question, a very good question. Well, ironically, Kennedy didn't have very long to think about the responsibility, because 3 weeks later, he was assassinated. So he never really got a chance to do anything with South Vietnam because of the assassination. But Saskia, I've been teaching this for a lot of years. That's the first time some kid asked that, and that's a great question. No, they didn't have enough support within the country to do anything like that. Now, this is a statement you have to write down. Had he lived, I don't think President Kennedy could have imagined that the United States would be embroiled in the conflict in Vietnam 10 years later. I think he would have been absolutely blown away if you would have told him 10 years after your assassination, we're still going to be in Vietnam. He would have just never thought that was possible. He had no intention of doing that. We would not have been in Vietnam. I believe firmly there's no Vietnam Wall that you go see in Washington, D.C. if President Kennedy's not assassinated. We're just not in that boat. We're not in that boat. I don't know what happens in that country, but I can tell you that we wouldn't have lost 58,000 American lives if he had been president 2 terms. Okay? All right, that'll take us to maybe the most important subtopic of this test material, and that is entitled the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. This, folks, is the worst piece of legislation this country has ever passed in its history, in my opinion and many historians' opinion. And you'll understand it when we get through it. Now, after President Kennedy was assassinated, President Johnson had to make a public statement on Vietnam because it was an issue. And this is the statement he made. Okay, and I really kind of want you to write this down. It's not very long. But this is the public statement that President Johnson made after Kennedy's assassination concerning Vietnam. Okay, this is what he stated publicly. And I'm going to quote him a few things he says to see if he's doing what he says he's doing. But this is the first one. He said, quote, "I am not going to be the president who saw Vietnam go the way China went." So after the assassination of President Kennedy, President Johnson stated publicly concerning his views on Vietnam, quote, "I am not going to be the president who saw Vietnam go the way China went." I'm not going to be the president who saw Vietnam go the way China went. Which tells you what? He's going to get involved. And we'll talk about that as we go. Okay, but keep that quote in mind. I am not going to be the president who saw Vietnam go the way China went. That doesn't mean he's going to go gung-ho, but he's certainly going to continue the efforts. Okay, Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. In the summer of 1964, a naval skirmish led to our rapid expansion in Vietnam. What I mean by ours is America's. In the summer of 1964, a single naval skirmish led to what we know as the American involvement in Vietnam, the expansion of that, from what Kennedy had given to what Johnson was going to commit. One naval skirmish in the summer of 1964 led to the rapid expansion of American involvement in Vietnam. This will be the start of just a tremendous buildup. Okay? What happened is on August 2nd, 1964, an American battleship called the USS Maddox exchanged gunfire with North Vietnamese torpedo boats. On August 2nd, 1964, an American battleship called the USS Maddox exchanged gunfire with North Vietnamese torpedo boats. PT boats, just like Kennedy's PT-109 boat. August 2nd, 1964, the USS Maddox exchanged gunfire with North Vietnamese torpedo boats. Guess where that exchange occurred? In the Gulf of Tonkin, which is surrounding what? North Vietnam. Okay? So, that exchange on August 2nd, 1964, between the USS Maddox and North Vietnamese torpedo boats occurred in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is off the North Vietnamese coast. 2 nights later, American ships reported a second exchange between themselves and North Vietnamese naval forces in the Gulf. 2 days later, American ships report a second skirmish with North Vietnamese Navy in the Gulf. So supposedly we've been attacked both August 2nd and August 4th by North Vietnamese naval ships or boats. As a result of that, on the evening of August 4th, 1964, President Johnson appeared on national television to speak to the American people about these 2 incidents. Okay? On August 4th, 1964, President Johnson appeared on national television and he spoke to the American people about these 2 incidents. And he referred to this action by the North Vietnamese as what? An act of war. Very good. So he speaks on August 4th, 1964 on national television to the American people. He tells them about these 2 incidents in the Gulf of Tonkin in which we were under attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. And he said he thought it was an act of war. Yeah.
Did they ever confirm the second attack, or was it just reported?
They never confirmed either one. Okay? During his speech, he continued telling the American people that he would ask Congress, this is important you know this, he told the American people that he was going to ask Congress to grant him full authority to take whatever actions needed against North Vietnam. He informed the American people on national television that it was his intention to ask Congress to grant him full authority to take whatever actions needed against North Vietnam for their heinous action of attacking our boats, which was never confirmed. Yep. He continued in his speech to the American people to state that he was going to ask Congress to grant him full authority to take whatever actions necessary against North Vietnam for their heinous acts against our boats. That was never confirmed. 3 days later, on August 7th, 1964, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. 3 days later, on August 7th, 1964, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. So again, Johnson continued in his speech on August 4th to the American people that he would ask Congress to grant him full authority to take any actions needed against the North Vietnamese for their heinous acts against our Navy. And 3 days later, on August 7th, 1964, Congress adopted the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The worst piece of legislation we've ever passed in this country. And tomorrow I will tell you, after our test, what that actually did. Okay? Perfect. Good job today. Remember, we are meeting in the Commons tomorrow for this test.